Hello everyone, welcome. This is Christine with Powder Crafts, and today I'm here with a design team project for Scrapping for Less. Today I'll be making 10 cards with one collection. We'll be using the Doodlebug at the Zoo collection. So I've got a 6x6 pad of pattern paper here from at the Zoo. Taking a peek at all the different pattern papers. This is a 24 sheet double-sided paper pad. So you'll get 2 of each design. And with that, I have some stickers. So we will be using this Koala Doodlepop sticker. It's kind of got a little bit of dimension. And the, I think this is just a half a sheet or half of the icon sticker sheet that you would receive. Mine was cut for shipping to me, but yours will not be. Yours wouldn't look like that if you purchased this set of stickers. Anyway, so let's start by, I'm going to take all of the pieces of paper completely out of the paper pad. And each one of those sheets that has a cut apart, I am going to cut up one. That one there that's got kind of like the picture on the back, I do keep those separate. I'm looking to frame those. I thought they'd be really cute on one of my walls. So once I've pulled out all the papers, I'm going to just cut the little cut up parts. I like to try to have everything sort of cut that I'm going to use ahead of time as far as this goes when I'm working on 10 cards, one collection. I also have a bunch of card sketches to the side. Sometimes I scroll Pinterest and try to find some new card sketch ideas, because if I am like having a little bit of a block of what I want to do, they give some great inspiration. Sometimes you start with a sketch and it turns into something completely different. And sometimes you start with a sketch and you follow the sketch exactly. So I do look for those. I do also go back to the Scrapping for Less card kit sketches. So if you go to their website, scrappingforless.com, there is a download section, and they have all the sketch sheets they have put out for their card kits, and you can go ahead and download those. So for this first card, I am kind of using a sketch. I kind of sat down and wasn't sure where I wanted to begin. So usually I always start these collections out this way. Although sometimes I just look at the paper and I know exactly what I want to do with certain things. In this video, you're going to see me use a stitched rectangle die. It is my absolute favorite die for cutting a main panel on a card. I love the stitch detail, and I know I'm going to get a perfect cut every time, because sometimes my cuts aren't always straight. So for this card, it requires kind of a diagonal in the middle, and so I just used my main panel there and kind of used a ruler to make diagonal like little tick marks on this paper and cut that. And now I'm using that stitched rectangle die again, so it has the matching stitches, so when I put it onto that main card panel, the stitch lines will line up. So once that is all set, I'm going to go ahead and adhere that with some it's a tape runner. I'm using a variety of card bases. They are all from my stash. I don't know the colors and I don't know the companies. Most of them are probably ones that I got in card kits throughout the years. I have quite a few of them, and I've decided, why am I hoarding these? I just need to use them. So now that I have this down, I'm kind of playing with, did I want to use one of the sentiment strips? I opted not to. I'm adding the lion, putting a white panel on the front of my card, and I'll deal with the inside later. Most of the inside of these cards are going to be done all the same way, so I decided to just do them all at the same time at the end. So again, I'm going to cut down the paper because the 6x6 paper doesn't really like to go through my Doodlebug very well. That edge that doesn't have the die on it will get all basically smushed when it goes through. So I usually have to cut it down. So I usually cut it down to either like 4.5 or 4.25. Depending on how much I want left over, and I use the stitch die. I don't really have any rhyme or reason why I choose one over the other when I'm cutting it. Sometimes I'm just not paying attention. So to go ahead off that piece that I have made the diagonal for in that first card, I am using that same like piece of paper for this card here. I'm also taking one of those little strips you can cut apart and adding it right there in the middle of the two pattern papers. And I'm using another cut apart that is more of like those little tags. This is having a wild time. I love that little gorilla. He is so adorable. So I'm going to go ahead and add him onto a really dark brown cardstock. And I'll add a white mat on the inside. And again, I'm going to just kind of grab that striped paper, just shove that in the card there, and I'll use that at the end. So I decided I'm going to use this one here, but I didn't want to have like 3 cards that were so similar. So I do end up kind of putting this one aside for the time being. I might go back to it at another time. So I'm kind of going back to the sketches to find something else because I don't want all 10 cards to be exactly the same. So I am just kind of using one of the sketches and cut a main panel down, and then I'm using a smaller rectangle stitch die from the set of dies that I have and cutting that out from some of this plain blue pattern paper. I want to make sure that enough of that main panel is showing, but I'm going to use one of the cut aparts for this card, so I want to make sure that it stands out from the blue, because the background from that cut apart is the same print as the main panel there. So I'm going to go ahead, kind of look at how I want this to go, and you'll see like the little lions there. It says cool cats. Trying to figure out which sentiment strip I want to use because I feel like I want something more on there, but the items I have really didn't have a lot of tiger type stuff. So I'm just going to probably leave it just like this. So I'm going to go ahead, add some foam to this square cut apart, and we're going to go ahead and add that, and then I'm going to use that happy birthday sentiment. I first think I'm going to stick it down all the way, but then I decided there was too much green on the other end, so I'm just going to kind of trim that down and give it like a little bit of a fishtail at the end. That says happy birthday to you, grabbing a black cardstock for my base. I thought that pattern paper would really pop. Then I'm going to go ahead, add a white mat to the inside, and stick that extra piece in there. This card is probably my absolute favorite of all of them. I am going ahead and going to cut the paper down and use that stitched rectangle die again. I'm pretty sure I use it on every single video or every single card in this video. I use it a lot. I'll be sad the day that it wears out and I got to get a new one. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that down, and I'll put that aside for a minute. Now this one here, I, for whatever reason, got lazy and did not cut that green paper, and you can see how like it bends there on that end. So I cut that out, and then I don't want to use that whole piece, so I'm going to line my die up again and about to cut half of it, but I need that stitching. I think in hindsight, I probably didn't need to do that because I'm using a little strip in the middle, but the way I put that strip, you'd probably notice there wasn't stitching on it. So anyway, that's how this card went. So I'm going to go ahead, and because of putting that green part in twice, I trimmed a little too much off, so I just used a paper cutter to just slice the smallest bit so that green paper went all the way over to the side. I'm using a really dark blue base, which matched that polka dot paper really well. And then I'm going to go ahead and use this Doodlepop sticker. It is dimensional, it's really cute, it's really fun, and so I want to pretty much just leave that on the front all by itself because frankly it's the star of the show. So running over to my card sketches again, kind of deciding how I want this one to play out. I am going to need about 3 different patterns of paper according to that sketch. And I'm kind of just fiddling with what I have because at this point I really don't know how I want this card to look. So I'm just kind of grabbing the leafy one, and then I decided to use some of the zebra print because at this point I had decided to use the zebra sticker from the Icon stickers. To make that little fishtailed edge, I am using this sentiment strip that has fishtailing on both ends, and because it is on both ends, I will be using a smaller rectangle die to just cut the very top off so that it's straight. So now I'm going to go ahead and die cut all my pieces. So there's my main panel, and then I'm going to go ahead and run that sentiment strip through. And then on this one here, I want the stitching to match since I have stitching on the main panel and on that strip, the zebra print strip. So I'm just using a rectangle die. It only kind of does the top and the side. I'm missing a little bit on the bottom, but I decided I wasn't going to worry about it because there's not enough of that bottom piece of the paper that's going to be visible. So this is a really, really dark green card base, and I'm going to go ahead and put everything together. This is probably the only card that I bring in something not from the paper pad that's paper related other than the card bases, because I am going to bring in a circle that is made from some black cardstock to pop my zebra onto. There really wasn't any other paper that I thought would work for this as far as the patterns go. Then I thought that black paper just needed a little something, so I'm grabbing a white gel pen and just kind of making dash lines along the outside edge. And it just kind of like gives like a little something to that black circle so that it doesn't just look like a plain old black circle. Adding a white mat to the inside of that one, and that card is done. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm kind of taking a peek at those sketches again, trying to also take a look at what kind of pieces do I have left over and what can I use. So here's that top piece from that second card I made, from the first and second. So I'm going to use that one again. I'm going to use that top half. So I'm using this really colorful piece for the panel, the main panel, and then I'm going to use the stitch rectangle die again for that really light brown that's kind of a tone on tone. It has all of the zoo animals on it in a brown and dark brown paper, and I want to use the wider end of that diagonal cut. So I'm going to go ahead and adhere that on, and I'm using again a really dark brown. This might be like hot fudge. This might be a MFT hot fudge card base. I'm going to go ahead and add those pieces, and then I decide, you know what, I just want a little pop of color. So I'm going to just take this kind of scrappy piece of blue paper And one side of it, it's a little uneven, just the littlest bit. So I grab another part of that, and I'm going to add a little bit of liquid glue, put that into place. Now I've already put this card on the card base, so I'm just using an X-Acto knife and just really carefully just keep going over the piece of paper till it cuts. I didn't want it to go too deep into the card base, so I just made light strokes over and over until the paper was cut off. Adding our little zookeeper with like a little coconut palm tree here. And I didn't like the way the palm tree was just kind of sitting there, so I decided to add one of the animals. And we're going to go ahead and add our white card base, playing around with using some of the sentiment strips, and I just opted not to. Now this card here was one that I thought was really fun. It uses the giraffe little strip and the little giraffe cut apart. I really love this polka dot paper. I would have really loved to have several pieces of it. I liked the colors, and I just thought it was perfect for everything, but I didn't have enough. And then I'm also using a scrap piece of this striped paper. So again, just using my stitched rectangle die. And then I'm going to add the strip of giraffes to the middle where the two pattern papers meet. I will trim off the excess there and add our little giraffes. Now this one I do decide to use a sentiment strip. I really want to use a zoo sticker, but it doesn't really seem to fit anywhere. So I'm just going to go ahead and score my card base and add this panel, and the whole time kind of figuring out which sentiment I want to use. And I just decide it kind of looks like a mommy and a baby giraffe, so I am using welcome baby and putting a piece of scrap in that paper to use for later. Now these elephants were adorable on this pattern paper, but I had nothing really elephant to use except for one of the cut aparts, which was kind of small. But I do like the card in the end, but I really struggled on what I was going to do with it. I know I wanted to use this elephant paper, but again, nothing really. I know Doodlebug papers, everything matches everything, but I just felt like nothing really matched it. So I cut it like kind of a little more than half, and I'm adding it onto just a white piece of cardstock. All right, so what I said about the black cardstock, I kind of lied, because here I'm just using some white cardstock. I am also using this scrap of blue paper to kind of add like a little line between the white cardstock and the elephant pattern paper cardstock. I'll just go ahead and trim the edges. Now, when I'm looking at the cut apart, I decide I don't want it to be a square, and it has this really fun frame to it, so I'm just going to cut around this frame, and I'm going to use this piece cut out like this. I just thought it added something a little bit different to the cards, because everything seems to be very straight edged and square, so let's do something a little different. Using the sentiment Tons of Fun, I didn't like it on there straight, so I went ahead and turned it sideways a little bit just to give it a little extra something, and it kind of fills in that white space a little bit better. So going ahead and adding that onto a card base, putting a white mat on the inside, and there's this elephant strip, and I'm going to use that on the inside, so I went ahead and tucked that in and put that away for a moment. So moving on to the next card, I kind of challenged myself to use the card bases that I already had cut, and I was running out of colors. I had like some pinks and light green and this yellow piece. I didn't want to use green on green, and I was going to use this piece of paper here, so I am using the yellow card base, and here I finally decided this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to stick this little zoo sticker right up at the top We have this fun little cutout that has all the zoo animals, and then I decided to use 2 of the stickers. But then I decided to bring in a third because I didn't like the way the bird just kind of stood there. So I thought maybe it would be fun to put the snake down. So you'll see that in just a moment. I'm just kind of popping stuff up to see how much room I have. So I know I want to pop this up, and I'm just trying to get rid of some of that stickiness. So, you know, there's nothing worse than having like a hair or something stick under there. So I add this snake, and at first I'm like, oh man, it blends in too much into the cardstock. But then I figure snakes really kind of blend into nature anyway, so I thought it was kind of fun, and I was just going to leave it like that. And then I have the bird kind of standing on his head. Not that you'd ever see that in nature, but anyway. So for the inside piece, I decided to use the alligators because it kind of matches the green theme going on in the front. But really any of the striped pieces or the strips of pieces of paper would have worked if that made any sense. All right, so the next card we are going to jump into those cute little monkeys. So I'm using this monkey paper. They're all over, they're on vines, and there are 2 cut-aparts that have the monkeys. So we are going to use both of those in this card and adding this onto some like this navy cardstock. So I'm going to add the bigger piece up here, and then I'm going to pop up this square piece on some foam tape. When I go to put that down, I realize the D is going to be covered. So I go ahead and pull that up so I can move it a little more into that corner. So I want them to overlap a little bit, but I want you to be able to read the letters. So that is all of the cards. So this is what I have left. I had 5 pieces of full sheets. I had some really nice pieces of scraps. I still have some cut apart, some sentiments, some strips. That little pile there to the right is just scraps that I'm not sure if I'm going to use them or not. So this is how I do my insides. I use the rectangle die so that the top side and bottom all have the diagonal or the stitches. And then I use kind of that little wavy one for the middle. So all the inside of the cards are basically done the same way. If you'd like to see how all those inside of the cards are done, you can see them on the blog post, which I will leave in the description below. Thank you so very much for joining me today. I feel like this video was kind of long, but I feel like I went through it really quickly. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you would like to see more and you are not already, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. But until next time, everyone, bye.